Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that school may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ, one of the co-hosts around here. My other one, my friend Jason. How you doing?
Doing great, AJ.
We just, I would assume you just ate lunch because I know I did. We're just coming back from our lunch break.
Yeah, but I take a different tack there. During the day, I'm more of a small snacker throughout the day. Love my Cliff bars and my, bananas and stuff like that. And so I pretty much only eat one big meal later, in the end of the day at supper time. So
that would explain a lot based on our appearances.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get sleepy during the day if I do that.
See, I do the whole intermittent fasting thing, and I've been doing it for a while. And it hadn't done squat for me. Clearly, I'm doing it wrong.
Well, I've heard a lot about that and things, but if I let myself get too hungry, the minute I do eat, I get so sleepy. So to stay alert, I just have to, I eat a lot of energy bars, a lot of granola bars and things like that, just so it doesn't weigh heavy on my stomach. So
well, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, last episode we talked about tips and tricks for studying. And this one, we're talking one that resonates more around me now, finally. And that is the work-life-school balance. How does one keep that balance, or what is the importance of keeping that balance? Was that a big area for you?
It was, but it was drastically out of whack in many ways. So but that's true for everybody. Everybody's got to have some sort of balance, right?
Of course.
It's just what works for you and your situation and things like that.
Sure.
Before we jump in, though, I do want to say, everybody, if you haven't yet, please visit Reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Check out our series, our most recent episodes, things like that. You can contact us, reach out to us with questions you may have for the episodes, small victories or accomplishments or successes that you may have. Tell us. We want to celebrate with you. Bring those up on the show, that type of thing. Also, social media handles. We are Reschool'd Pod on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, those major social media channels. And then, of course, on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple, Google, Spotify. Make sure to like us, sign up for the notifications so you get notices when we post a new episode and things like that if you're so inclined.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump right into the quick question. Let's go ahead and get into it because I have a feeling this is going to be, it potentially could be a very lengthy podcast episode. So personal question again, grade the statement because we've been doing this for all of our tips and tricks episodes. Grade yourself on your work-life-school balance skills in college.
So I'm going to qualify my grade here.
Okay.
I'm going to give myself a B+. I did pretty well.
Again, you're still ahead of the curve.
I did a pretty good job of balancing things based upon what I needed. But it wasn't a balance. I was strongly skewed in the favor of a couple of things and very basically underrepresented in some facets of that general mix of work life in school. So how about you?
I'm actually going to give myself a higher grade on this one compared to all the other ones because I feel like I did pretty well in this one. I would probably give myself probably an A- because, obviously there's areas that I could have improved on, especially at different stages and whatnot. But this is actually one of the areas I spent a lot of effort on in trying to maintain and also understanding why it's important to maintain because that gave me a reason to go forward and keep being motivated to do this. So, yeah, I would say probably A-.
Oh, good. Well, I look forward to
finally
hearing
beat
about
you
that.
In the GPA somewhere.
Well, it seems like you enjoyed yourself in many facets more than I did. So,
yeah. Well, and we're going to get to that too. So let's jump into the main topics. Let's start with the way we've always been started. What do we mean when we say work-life-school balance?
Well, to me, it means that everybody has something going on in those three areas, right? Life can include your social life. It can include your family. It can include, honestly, anything that's pressing on you outside of your requirements for work and school. I've said this before in the podcast, the only thing you'll do more in your life as a single activity than sleep, than work is sleep, right? So work is a major part of your life. And when you go back to school, depending on what your objectives are when you go back, your stage in life, that type of thing, and how you attack school, whether it's part-time, online, full-time, it's going to be a significant portion of your life too. For many people, it takes the place of work. So that traditional dichotomy of work and social life, right? Work-life balance that they go to. Well, school now becomes part of that. And you can't just say that's work, right? It's a third category because oftentimes work is involved in there as well. So for me, it's how you balance between those three aspects of your life and make them all work at the same time.
Yeah, for me, it reminds me of this meme that was out a while back, and I'm sure you've seen the original one, which is you have the triangle, and at the vertices of the triangle, you have good grades, social life, and enough sleep, and it just says you can only choose two. Because if you're going to get good grades and you're going to have enough sleep, then your social life's going to get affected. If you want social life and sleep, then your grades are going to get affected, and so on. And then somebody had the genius idea to just right below it says how it really is. And so they've changed this triangle with three things that you choose two from to a decagon. I mean, it's got 10 sides, and it says friends, class, work, family, homework, sleep, hobbies, food, extracurricular activities, and love life. And then in the center, where it would normally say choose whatever, it says attempt to do everything until stress takes over and things start slipping and you end up crying in your bed, deciding to do none of it and just watching Netflix to escape to somewhere else. I mean,
that is a sad reality for a lot of my students.
It is. And I think this idea of work-life school balance is something that can affect students in a very, very negative way if they don't take the time to properly balance those three areas.
That makes complete sense. I agree. Right. I mean, remember the whole purpose behind most of this, right? I mean, work can be a more meaningful calling in life, but to a certain extent, it is a means to an end. I mean, that end may be that is the work is your calling, so some level of accomplishment in that, and you're working your way towards something. Or it could just be to support yourself in the other things, right? And in that case, the other aspects, the social life takes a bigger role. Some people go to school because of fulfillment, right? For bettering themselves. And some people go to school just to better their career opportunities as a stepping stone, as part of the work process. So again, there's always going to be some balance. But if you were going to put a triangle up there and put all of those in each corner, right? How it tips may not be the same for everybody, and it may not be right for everybody. You know, you've said before, and I look forward to hearing more about this, that, you know, work-life balance was important for you. And I think what was more important for you was the life aspect. For me, at least early on, I knew my purpose there, and life, I tried to integrate that into the school and then the work environment, but the school was always first, and then the work was second. And in many ways, life took a significant backseat. I for a long time, I really didn't have one at all. I mean, and so anyway, I think we come at this from different viewpoints, different backgrounds.
Yeah, this should be pretty interesting because, like you said, we come from different backgrounds. We come from different philosophies and which ones, or I guess you would say priorities of which ones we wanted to focus on. And I think we need to first off start by saying one's not better than the other one. Like, life is not better than school or work. Work's not better than life and school. School's not better than work or life. Not one is better than the other as a blanketed statement. It's just a matter of which one is more of a priority to you as the individual. And you've got to come up with that.
Yeah.
The next question I have is, why do you think it's important to work towards a healthy work-life school balance? Why is it important to take the time to understand this balance and actually put things in place that are going to help this balance?
Well, I would jump into it by saying, let's start the same way we start in our life plan episode. You know, what are the end goals? What do you want in your world? Okay. And it's going to be more than a level of education. It's going to be more than school. And it's going to be more than just the things that the social life can offer, the friendship, the family, things like that. There are other things there that matter to you, at least to some degree. So if you start with the end in mind and you say, this is the journey I want to take, I caution anybody against seeing the end as an objective or a goal, rather seeing the journey towards that end. The end is just the direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
The path itself that you take, the whole process, that is life. That is that what you're balancing is itself what makes up your life, right? So that being said, balancing the aspects of this journey in a way that keeps you moving in the direction you want to. Because the end still is your goal, right? That is your direction. And you know when you get off of that direction, you know when things are not going the way you want them to. And so, whether that's spending more time in one area or the other, right? Maybe it's spending more time in all of them, okay? Just an absence of effort in any way. The joke we made at the very beginning about the decagon with the various things, and the result is you lay in bed crying, watching Netflix, feeling sorry for yourself, right? That is an all too common reality, right? Life can be overwhelming. I'll go back to that life plan episode again. And if you haven't watched it, please do. It's one of our, I think, more meaningful, more impactful episodes that we've had. But it really helps you put things into perspective about this whole thing you're doing, school life, etc., work, being a journey. And if you can balance things the way you want and continue the effort, continue moving forward, continue the diligence, okay? Often that relates very strongly to the level of motivation you have in each one, right? Because ultimately it's about contentment, right? And each of these is going to play some part in your ultimate contentment. Any one of them may make you happy at a given moment or may make you feel fulfilled at that moment. But it's ultimately the goals, right? The goals that you're working towards and how you work towards them that leads to the long-term contentment. So anyway, that's where I want to stay. I want to focus on that aspect of that balance that you can achieve in life throughout the journey leads to contentment throughout, not just in the end, but contentment throughout. And so I think it's highly necessary.
Yeah, I would agree. My answer to this question on why I think it's important, actually, to me, when I read this question in the show doc, that the answer's in the question, because it says, why is it important to work towards a healthy work-life school balance? That word healthy. I mean, having a good balance is going to help your mental health in so many ways, because you're not always going to be stressed about, oh, am I doing this, or do I have this, or should I be doing this, or did I miss out on that, or this grade, or whatever. When you have a balance, it's going to ease your mind and your stresses to the point where just things come as is, because when something, if something didn't work out in school, then maybe something worked out in life because you put that time in there, to work with that balance. That to me was, again, one of the driving forces of why I put effort into that balance, because I knew if I didn't, I would have a really stressful situation. Also, another one, just kind of a 1A, 1B. And it's really interesting because I think you actually, your songwriting, you actually have a song about this one. And that is, I've always said I would much rather regret what I did than regret what I didn't do. I don't want to look back, because you're only in college one time. You're only in that age one time. If I look back right now at the age that I'm at and say, I'm going to try I'd break something. And healing back then was a lot easier than healing at my age now.
Sure.
So I don't want to look, I didn't want to, and I know at that age, that's what I was thinking. I didn't want to look back 15 years from then and to say, man, I really wish I'd have done that. I wish I'd have just taken some time to experience life and do this thing over working all the time or studying all the time or those kind of things. Because I had a lot of friends who did a bunch of different things where they either traveled or they did some experiences or whatever. And I wanted to experience those. Now, did I get to do all of them? Absolutely not. Because again, I had to have that balance. but I weave those into my decisions because I didn't want to have those regrets.
Well, AJ, I want to, and surprisingly enough, we've never truly talked about this. I want to give me some examples because I think the outside world would benefit from it as well.
So,
What did you do to balance? I mean, I know you were a student athlete. I know you were a student who had ambitions to go on to higher education, which meant you were, in a family that reinforced that. So
yep.
you were more serious about education, but you cared that much. So it looks like you cared about the combination of you cared about everything.
Yeah. So for me, as when I was going through college, the work-life school balance was at the top was life. Near second was school. And at that time, because of the situation I was in, work wasn't as high of a priority. Work was there to just give me some spending money, but it wasn't meant for me. Clearly, it wasn't meant for me to be saving because I didn't. But the top two were life and school. And I kind of started getting into that when I was in high school because, again, I've said this on other podcasts. I had a great upbringing in the dynamics between my parents because my dad was the one. It was always about school's everything because of his background. Education is everything. And my mom was about education is good, but don't lose your life not experiencing life. And so I had a really good balance as I was raised. So for me, it was in high school, especially when I was able to drive, I wasn't one that had curfews. I didn't have limitations on what I could do. The only limitations that I had for what I could do were my school grades okay? Where they needed to be? Now, again, okay is not C's for my family, like A's and the occasional B. But it was as long as my grades were fine, I was able to go experience life and do whatever. I didn't have a curfew. I didn't have limitations on where I can go. And that was a really cool thing for me to be able to grow up into. So when I got into college and I was on my own, I still had that foundation. I still wanted to have my grades up, but I also wanted to have a life. I wanted to go to the parties. Like I said before, I wasn't in a fraternity, but I went to a lot of fraternity parties. I also had friends say, "Hey, we're going to go do this." I think I mentioned this before on another podcast that we paddled from the corner of Georgia all the way through Florida to go to the Gulf of Mexico, which was about a week paddle trip. That was a cool experience. The same guy took a group of us to the northwestern point of Georgia, where I think it was the deepest cave systems in the northern hemisphere located. And it was about an 8-hour round trip splunking. So splunking is just cave diving. You go down to the bottom of the cave and come back. It was about an 8-hour round trip. That was one of the coolest experiences that I ever went through. And it was one of those things where I looked at it and I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. One, I'm out of shape, a little overweight. How am I going to go down to the bottom of this cave and then have the energy to get all the way back up? And when I have those things in front of me, I always think, okay, I'm just going to prove myself I can do this. So I did it. And it was a lot of fun. And it was just an experience that I will never forget. I loved it. And it was awesome. And that's just two of the many experiences that I got to experience in life on top of, like I said, the college parties, the, college experience in and of itself, the non-academic side, and then again, playing sports and whatnot. Those are the reason I was able to do that is because I had that priority list for myself. I had that.
Yeah, if I can jump in, was there ever a time that you had to compromise on it? I mean, where you really had to put life on the back burner to school or work? And one thing I think, I may be able to talk to this a little better than you, how work became very important, maybe more important than the life and living aspect of it at certain points. Were there times during college that varied for you, or you had to modify your balance?
That is a funny question because later on in my school career, my college career, work had to become more of a priority for obvious reasons. And when work became more of a priority, then something had to give, and it was in the form of athletics. My last semester, or my last year, I should say, in college, I didn't play soccer because I didn't have the time. So our college had a soccer team my sophomore year. We were the inaugural soccer team, with first one in the school. So I have the record for the first, save, the first shutout, the first win, all in one game. And then once I got to the end of my college career, I had to look and say, okay, I've got all these classes I got to take, and I really need these classes because these are the end of my college career. I need these to be very high in grades because I'm going to have to go to master's program. So I had to make the decision of, okay, I'm going to have to give up something, and soccer was it. And it just so happens that soccer kind of also made the decision for me because, like, every year you have new recruits, and I ended up going down on the depth chart, and I was like, you know what? It's okay. I'm fine. So, but it still, it still hurt because soccer's what I played since I was 5.
Yeah. I think a lot of our students may be starting out from a little bit different point than you, and even a different point than me. I can jump into my story a little bit. I was first generation and everything, and paying for college was a big deal, and I was so fortunate. I expected to fully take out student loans and things like that, and in a different episode we talk about paying for college in different ways. But I was in that fortunate crowd that, okay, it relieved a lot of stress, but it caused so much worry for me as to whether I was going to be able to keep that scholarship. I had to maintain a 3.2 grade point average, which is not insignificant considering, it doesn't take many B's in a row or the occasional C to get down to that average. So I started out college where in high school, I was way more life balanced than I was school or work. I worked on the farm with my dad or my godfather, but mainly I made money mostly during the summer, right? To that type of thing. But I always had support from my family, and not everyone has that. When I went to college, it was kind of, I moved away. My parents were a few hours away, so I was kind of on my own then. They had helped me buy a car and everything. So I was in a pretty decent position. I didn't have much money in the bank when I went there. But everything was paid for as far as living and cafeteria, eating plan and all that kind of stuff. And I lived on campus and stuff. So school was number one, and it was pretty much the only thing to me. My ideas of playing sports quickly went out the window when the scholarships came along. The whole life aspect just had to fall out the window as well. A lot of my life before that was playing sports, and that was my primary form of social interaction, engagement, and things like that. But school became everything. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to be a loser. I didn't want to be part of the embarrassment of not making the grade and stuff. So my freshman year, I probably almost made myself sick. I woke up at 7 a.m. so I could be in the library right at 8 o'clock when it opened. I studied a minimum of 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Mother, holy cow.
I was number one in all of my classes, hands down. Like, it usually wasn't even close. It was a misbalance in my life. It was just academics. It was just school. I wasn't working at the time, and I didn't have a social life, so I wasn't spending any money. I wasn't doing the parties. I wasn't doing any of that thing. Now, when school went along, that all shifted, and I started out and I made all A's to start with, and the pressure lightened up, and I fell into my concentration and my major, and then I got to study abroad during the summer, and I got back, and then I started working, okay? And that's when the balance shifted like crazy. It was, if I wasn't at school, I was working. And it was always waiting tables or setting up conference things for hotels and stuff like that. But I still very little social life. I didn't have much of that at all, quite frankly, until my junior year and my senior year. And really, my only social life then was just, when I wasn't working. School was what took a backseat later on because I just couldn't keep it up. I burnt out on that aspect of it. And as a matter of fact, I went into law school nearly burnt out completely. I had the hardest time managing things. I just couldn't put in those hours anymore. And, it had gradually declined over college. So my work-life balance shifted like crazy. And it wasn't until I got in law school where I integrated life more, quite frankly. I started doing more things. I started enjoying myself, started doing things for fun with other people, so social stuff. I never really had any relationships early on, like romantic relationships type thing. It was just I forewent everything out of fear. And, I do regret that. I could have done things differently and still achieved the exact same thing I have achieved now. So I do have a few regrets looking back in that regard. And, honestly, I guess my experience here is just to try to give people out there information enough to say that, these are things that I don't want to miss in life. Sure, it was very important that I work all those hours in the restaurants to support myself. It allowed me to study abroad a semester when I didn't work. It allowed me to study abroad during the summer when I didn't work. It allowed me to the free time I did have. I'd get up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. and take my kayak out to. I went to school at a party school on the beach, and
Oh man, on the beach?
yeah, so I would get up at 6 a.m. and there'd be nobody on the beach. I could make it to the beach in 5 minutes.
I wonder why.
Right. And I'd go out there and paddle in my kayak most mornings, or I'd get on my road bike. And, those were things I could buy. I could afford my insurance. I could afford my gas. I could afford, to have those little things and to constantly save up. I was a big money saver. I was very tight, which was easy because, you don't have too much of a social life other than those few things. It allows you to save up a little bit of money towards stuff.
No kidding.
But anyway, I balanced it that way. But I do regret. I do regret not having more time for friends. I regret not having more times for relationships. Because those were all things I missed for a goal. And at the time, it seemed right for me, and it's worked out well. I've achieved a lot of education. I have a good job. I'm proud of everything I've accomplished in that realm. And, now I have a loving family, kids, all that kind of wonderful thing. And what I'd like to think is a good social life and stuff. So things come full circle and you can balance those aspects of your life out. But there may be times when they're skewed necessarily.
Oh yeah.
So that being said, but like that song I wrote, that you were mentioning, that's a plug for it. So if you guys want to check out Things That I've Missed by Jay and Coates, please do check it out. But that being said, yeah, there's going to be times there's a skew, plain and simple. And you will regret the things you didn't do more than you regret the things you did. So to the extent you can make things happen and still see that you're moving in the direction you want to in life, I highly endorse that.
Yeah, actually, one of the future episodes is probably going to be my favorite episode that we potentially will ever do, is an episode on opportunity cost. Because I think your understanding of opportunity cost is what sets you apart from having a good life and a great life. The decisions that you make using opportunity cost. And to me, I learned that again at a younger age when I was in college, because I would look at, like what you're saying, could I have the straight A's if I got rid of my social life? Absolutely. There's no question I could. But to me, it was a decision of, is it worth giving up my social life to get those grades when I can essentially get the same thing with the grades that I have currently and get that social life on the side? And there's a lot of things when you're dealing, especially when you're dealing with grad school, it's not simply your GPA. There's other factors that go into that. And those other factors, especially the big one, was the interview. Interviews is where I am the absolute most confident in anything I do. Mm-hmm. I don't mind talking. I don't mind answering questions, and I'm pretty quick-witted. So if I don't know the answer, I can make it up if I need to.
It helps to have that skill to have a podcast, doesn't it?
It does. I used to say, if I can't dazzle you with brilliance, I can baffle you with BS. And it's just one of those things. I leaned more on that, knowing that my grades weren't going to be. Granted, I had good grades. I mean, they weren't terrible grades, but I was going to lean more on my interview skills or my interpersonal skills more so than my grades. And then I knew I had to also take the standardized test too, which I felt fine with as well. So I, again, used that opportunity cost decision-making tool to say, I'm willing to give up a little bit of my GPA to go have fun. And again, not everybody's like that. And there's no right or wrong answer to this whatsoever.
But I will say this, AJ, having come from the opposite end of the spectrum,
Mhm.
I missed some things, and I know that, and I could have done the same thing. I could have cut back on the studying, and I could have cut back on the work to enjoy the other aspect, and I didn't. And in many ways, I regret it. So, to the extent you can recognize that, but it's just a cautionary tale to say, do not, by any means, abandon what is going to move you towards ultimate contentment. Because even just based on my personality, the social life aspects that I missed would have not given me long term contentment if I missed in my greater goals of, personal development and my career objectives, which I can happily say I do exactly what I want to in this life. And I think you do too,
Yeah.
right? We both achieve our career goals in terms of what we do for a living and what we do on a daily basis. You and I both said neither one of us feel like we work a day of our lives,
Amen.
even though some of the things we do we don't want to be doing. Right? It is work. It is work to grade. It is work to create tests. It is work to read and do academic research. But it's what we want to be doing, and our paths allowed us to get there, and we took dramatically different paths to get there. So I think you and I are a testament to there are more than one path.
Yeah.
But it may be that you had a better balance than I did.
Well, there's no question. I don't, and that's the thing. I don't know if it's considered I don't think I would say anything's a better balance. It's just a better, it's a balance for you. And by the way, we're going to go over, but I don't care. We run the show and we can go over a little bit because I think this is such a good topic. I wanted to move to the next question, which is what are some common reasons why students struggle to find that balance? Or if they've had that balance, what has gotten it to fall out of balance?
Well, I would say first, for your traditional students from, I'd say, upper middle class families, I guess socioeconomic status is a big part there, but you see a lot of pressure from parents and loved ones and things like that. So meeting other people's expectations, with me, they were really not other people's expectations. They were my own. I was in a very fortunate position there that nobody really expected much out of me, at least not by most standards. And so, but for those who do feel that there are expectations that they have to live up to, all of a sudden they study more than they would otherwise. They forego going to the parties and things like that. Some people who are highly sheltered, right, in high school, that is so much emphasis by their parents or loved ones on their academics, on their playing sports or being involved in clubs and all that stuff. And they never got to fully enjoy themselves the way we did in high school, I suppose. They oftentimes rebel, as they say, go crazy in college, and they put the school life on the back burner and they focus too much on fun because they get that autonomy, they get that freedom that they lacked early on. So I would say it's those external pressures. I mean, number one for most people is your parents,
Yeah.
right? Are they pushing you to become a doctor one day, or are they pushing you to make all A's, or are they pushing you towards this? And then how do you react to them? Are you rebelling against the expectations that they have? So I'd say it's other people, the perceptions, you bending your will towards that or of other people, whether it's accommodating them or rebelling against them, and you get off the path. So that's number one, I'd say.
That to me is the single biggest reason is your background, the way you were raised. And that point that you brought out about students who had helicopter parents, the ones that are always just over them, controlling everything and telling them what they can and cannot do. And then once they get out of that, get to that rebellious stage, I can't tell you how many times I saw that in my high school, going into college and so on. And I look back and I've told my parents this so many times, how much I appreciated the way that they raised me and therefore allows me to raise my kids the same way. And so to kind of give you an example, and I'm going to use this in a hypothetical sense to be, I guess, legal. In high school, you had kids that were drinking, at parties. It's not a surprise. There's kids that drink in high school when they shouldn't be. And a lot of those kids I looked at, their parents were the ones that were the naive ones. My kids would never do that because we don't allow them to do that. And my parents were like, hypothetically speaking, my parents were like, If you want to, go ahead. Here's the rules, though. Rule 1 is if you do, you call us and we'll come pick you up. You're not driving. Or rule 2 is you stay there. But if you ever break those 2 rules, you're done. You're not leaving the house. And that sat with me so hard to the point where, 1, I appreciated it more than they'd ever know. But 2, they didn't realize this, but it took the fun out of not, the possibility of getting caught. It took the fun out of it. And so I would go to these parties and I would be the only sober one that typically was the DD because I wanted to make sure everybody else would get home, okay. And it just took all of that off the table. And also it created this really open platform, this open line of communication between me and my parents that, like I said, that is going still strong today. Now, I understand when I say that, again, I was in a very different situation. Not all parents are like that. But like I said, that is my background. So I do think a lot of it has to do with the way you were raised from your parents.
Let me go ahead and bring up one more
Yep.
that I see all the time with my students now. It's the financial aspect, money, right? Later on in my college career, I moved off of campus. I needed money to study abroad. I was paying my bills. And I did want to do things like go out to restaurants and things like that. I wanted to enjoy some aspects of life like that costs money, right? And being in a food and beverage town, things can be kind of expensive. Well, I needed money and I didn't have it, right? So that being said, lots of my students, they're working full time or close to full time because not only do they have their own bills to pay, they have the bills of their family members. Yeah. Sometimes they're supporting their parents. Sometimes they already have children while they're in school. Sometimes they just have more expenses on themselves. They weren't eligible. I see this for a lot of my students who may not have had any of the state assistance in the form of, scholarship, or they may not have qualified for financial aid type scenario, because there's a demographic of student that does not, unfortunately, qualify in that realm as well. So it wasn't a question, are they going to work, right? It was always just a question of whether they can balance the school with the work, because the means or ability to support yourself was so instrumental. And that's not something you or I either one faced, right? We felt like we had a place in college and financially we were going to be secure enough in that way. But that's not the case for everybody. So for those students out there who are listening to this and recognize that, hey, college is something I have to do in addition to work, that is my primary, well, that's understandable.
Yeah, work. That's why I said there's no better balance one to the other. There's nothing in it. We're not trying to tell you that one's better than the other. I'm not trying to say life is better or social life is anywhere better. I was just in my situation, the situation that I was blessed with, because I understand me not having to work. And I'm with you. I know I have students in my class that I know that they have to work to not only support them, but their family as well. That's a whole nother thing. And I don't want to take that for granted when I'm speaking about this. I don't want people to go, well, he just had to know. I get that. And I understand my background blessed me with the ability to put life at the top of that balance. Not everybody has that. And that's why we wanted to do this podcast, is to help everybody, no matter what your situation is.
And, both of us have studied, and I teach in management in some of my courses, my Principles of Management course. I bring up, many people have heard of this. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, a lot of psychologists may not put a ton of weight on that model, but basically it says that there are lower level needs that generally have to be met, at least to some degree, before you fully move on to higher level stuff. At the very top of the pyramid is something we call self-actualization. And that's really, getting the most out of life, exploring things, fulfilling yourself as a person, actualizing, bringing to the present yourself. Where at the very bottom is food, shelter, water, things like that. So if you don't have those things secured like we did, the food, shelter, water aspect, right? You focus on that first and you secure that first. Well, I saw mine at risk by virtue of the scholarships and things like that. Of course, I always had financial aid if I needed to fall back on it and things like that. Some people don't even have that. And so, a higher level on that need paradigm is, the social interaction, the love, the appreciation, and things like that. And I got a lot of that from my family, but I was able to forego the social aspects and having a significant other and things like that because I didn't feel like fully those security elements, right, were met because I thought it could be lost at any point in time. So I can, to a certain extent, understand where many of our students are coming from, and they have to say, all right, well, look, I have to work first and stuff like that. Well, in that case, I would say the portions that have to go, the balance that has to happen, if you want to still be able to get the most out of school, is you focus, number one, on securing those base needs. And then two, everything else after that is for a short period of time, right? 'Cause college doesn't last forever. You focus on the academic portion. And life will, for a few years, have to take a back seat. But luckily, it's just for a few years. Okay.
Yeah, anything to me, anything of value, anything that you see of value requires some kind of sacrifice. No question. I mean, if it's just given to you, then the value's probably not as strong to the stuff that you would sacrifice. So even in me, when I talk about life and my social life, and granted, I'm going to talk about that in a minute too, but there was a sacrifice there. And even if it wasn't my sacrifice, I understood that my parents sacrificed some stuff too. And which led me to now understand when I have kids that I'm going to have to sacrifice some things. So it all revolves around understanding what's being sacrificed when and where your priorities are, much like you just said. Let's get to the next one, which is the question is, do you have any advice for how to go about achieving this balance? Obviously, this is being the tips and the tricks. We're going to go back into what are some tips that we have for the listeners on achieving that balance, whatever that balance may be. So I'm going to start it with my favorite one, which is just on brand based on what we've been talking about. But I want to, in the words of Jason, qualify it. I feel like that's a big lawyer word. You got to qualify things, right? So my first tip, probably my biggest tip, is don't undervalue the importance of fun in your life. I talk about how much fun, I like to have fun, but here's the qualifying piece. It is whatever fun means to you. Fun is not always going to be the same for everyone. Fun is not always going to be traveling the world or spending nights out at the bar. Or when I talk about my fun, it didn't always include that. One of the things that I really got into in college that is still with me today, I still do it every year, is I have a group of guys that are close friends of mine, and we play fantasy football. For those who don't know what fantasy football is, or you think it's stupid, you're probably right. But it is just something for me that grabs my attention. It gives me the camaraderie, gives me the competition, but it only takes up one day of the week because, they really only play games on Sunday. The majority of them play just on Sunday. It didn't take much time away from anything for me to be a part of that, but it was so much fun. That's what I'm talking about when I say whatever fun means to you. Does it mean going out? Does it mean sports? Does it mean friends? Does it mean gaming? I know a lot of my students are into gaming. That's still staying at home. That's not requiring a ton of money. It's a matter of finding what that fun element is to you and incorporating it into your life, including it into your schedule. And it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be every month, depending on what it is. But it is just giving you something to look forward to, which in turn, what we talked about a couple episodes ago, gives you that motivation.
That's great advice.
You got one?
Yeah, and I really just have one, and I guess it's a little two-parter, but it's this. Everything is a balance, right? Anything can tip any given way at any point in time. But to figure out what is the right balance for you at any point in time, there are going to be external influences and things like that, of course. But you, personally, you have to make the decision based upon two things. What do you want out of life? What do you want, not what other people want, right? So black out those external influences to the extent possible. What do you want out of life? Because that's what's going to keep you engaged. That's going to give you the long-term contentment. And then 2, what is the right direction to get there? Now, if you understand those 2 things, what you want out of life and the direction to get there, that will help you set the right balance at any point in time. There is always the opportunity for the balance to get skewed because of your internal fears or your internal wants or the external pressures, right? Anything will allow you to skew the balance. But if you want to keep it to the best or to the greatest extent possible, if you want to keep that balance somewhere aligned where you can take part in everything but still move in the direction towards what you want out of life, you're going to have to understand those 2 things. And that takes some time, some introspection, perhaps some hard conversations with third parties who may be influencing your life, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good one, or 2 actually. I've got 2 more, and they're fairly quick. One of them is find a support group. Make sure you have a good surrounding cast. So friends will always be a factor in your life that can pull you in many different directions. You're going to have friends that ask you to go do this, you're going to do this. And just as much as they can be good influences, they can also be bad influences. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to find friends that are going to be supportive of your decisions, whatever those decisions may be. So if you're talking about a friend asking you to go to a party and you say no because you need to study, is that friend going to badger you and try to peer pressure you into just saying, forget studying, you don't need to do the grades, just come with us and have fun? Or are they going to be supportive in a way to say, you know what, that's probably the right call. I'll check up on you once we're done, or I'll let you know, when we get home or whatever. You're looking for those friends that's going to support you in any way possible that they can for the betterment of your life. That's what a true friend is. And in that situation, for a friend to be able to tell you when you tell them, no, you can't go to the party because you got to study, that's going to do things more for you than just simply your grades. That's going to lower your stress and your anxiety levels. That's going to do, things to your confidence. There's a lot of things that's going to do. So those are the type of people that you want kind of in your inner circle, your supporting cast. So that would be my first one. My second one, and this is almost talking to Jason specifically based on what he was talking about, especially when he said his first semester. I've said this before, and you can say it for a whole bunch of different things. Stay liquid. More specifically, cut yourself some slack. If things don't go exactly the way they're planned, that's okay. If school doesn't, the outcome of the semester doesn't come the way you want it, odds are it's because probably you put somewhere else in that balance, you put your time and your focus, which means something else got the benefit from it. It's not the end of the world. And once you start doing that, you'll start to feel that pressure be released. And I like you said, Jason, the first semester you said you were just having tough nights sleeping. But once you started to see that it's not the end of the world and things were going to be okay regardless of anything else, it started to get better. And I would still venture to say that your grades are probably still around the top.
That's accurate. Yeah. You fall into a pattern, and it kind of you start out strong, develop those study habits. We talk about that in a different episode. Things kind of flow downhill from there. I mean, I got better at doing what I was doing. So things, I'm not going to say they got easier, but I was able to accomplish more with less.
Yeah.
So
it reminds me of a quote by Albert Hubert. I love this quote because this is pretty much my mantra. But don't take life too seriously because you'll never get out of it alive.
I love that quotation. That's awesome.
I mean, it speaks volume because you only have a certain amount of time in this world. And as much as, like you said, we have to work, as much as if you're in school, you're going to have to do that. You want to also have that life aspect. So, within those reasons, like I said, to me, the biggest one is to just implement some kind of fun in your life. So that way it's not miserable. It doesn't feel like a miserable time. And understand you're not alone. We all go through seasons. We all go through times that are tough, and we all make it out on the other side eventually. And so, I saw one of my students ask me a while back, what can they do to help in their school, not necessarily in my class, but just what can they do to help better their experience. And one of the things I told them was just ask for help. don't think that you can do it holistically on your own. Don't be afraid to ask for that help, because it doesn't show that you're less, hardcore, or you know what you're doing. No, help's there for a reason. Well, Jason, that was a phenomenal show. It went about 20 minutes too long, but that's okay. Like I said, we run the show so we can do what we want. And I could probably, sadly, I could probably spend another hour talking about this.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any end to this topic. It's just a rolling conversation.
I would love to hear what some of the listeners have to say about this, because it might be something where we do a part 2 of this episode. But on the next episode, we are going to be talking about something that runs right hand in hand with this. So how do you achieve that work-life school balance? A lot of it has to do with your time management abilities and your time management skills. So we're going to be talking about that on the next episode, dealing with the Tips and Tricks series. But before we go, Jason, you got anything to say?
I just want to remind everybody, like I do every time, we're here for you. We want to talk about things that interest you. So if you've got topics you want to hear us discuss, right? We may have never thought about it ourselves, but if you want to hear us talk about something, we'll develop an opinion on it pretty quickly. So anyway, get those into us through our website or through our social media handles, and we'll address them.
Absolutely. Well, y'all take care and have fun, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.